Welcome to Internet TCI, our monthly program where we explore the global Internet. My name is Rich Wiggins, and as always, I'd like to introduce my partner in crime, fresh back from a trip to Europe, Charles Severance.
Thanks, Rich. Well, I'd like to welcome you back from your vacation. You weren't with us in the last show. The last show was all in Indianapolis at the Midwest Cable Expo, and we had a great time, and you weren't there.
I wish I could have been there. I was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we tried, as you know, really hard to come up with a See You, See Me remote, but didn't quite pull that off. But we had a lot of fun up there, and I want to tell a couple of up-north Internet stories.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started with some of your inimitable stories?
Well, okay.
What's going on lately?
Well, part of what I was doing while I was up there, I was giving some classes on web design. And in the middle of doing that, I needed to work on an article that I was past deadline on for a magazine called New Media. New Media has been around longer than we've had a worldwide.
Have you ever turned in an article before the deadline?
I don't think I've ever done anything on time.
Yeah, because, I mean, every time I write something, it's always after the deadline. But go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were just, okay.
Yeah,
So one of the things I had to do in this article was I had to research what's called web middleware, and that's a set of products that you could use in conjunction with your web server, for instance, to connect to a database. And there's just a panoply of software that's come out in the last year. And we wrote up in my significant other's Miata. I had a backpack full of product literature about all of this stuff. But I needed to use the internet to learn more about it. And so I sat down one rainy day in a Days Inn in Escanaba, Michigan, trying to write this article. And I realized I had become completely spoiled in my research methods because of the internet.
Right.
When I'm at home, I am sitting there with my 10 megabit a second TCI Met connection. I can hop from one web page to another. I can follow a hyperlink with reckless abandon. And if I see something that looks marginally useful, what do? I print it. And so it's very wasteful. It wastes bandwidth, it wastes trees, but it's very efficient in an odd way. I get my stuff done as fast as I want. I'm not sort of bound by the friction of hyperlinks. I can click as fast as I want. Well, you're on a 28.8 modem and you don't have a printer and you have a small screen, your life changes. You have to revert back to old high school ways of writing a term paper. So I immediately ran off to the drugstore, bought myself a pack of old-fashioned 4x6 cards, and started taking notes the old way, you know.
Well, I actually had to write a column that was overdue, and I was sitting in a train, and I actually had to write it on paper.
Oh, you didn't have the back of an envelope like Mr. Lincoln?
Exactly. So I actually had to use paper. Then I typed it in later because I didn't have a portable computer. So, you know, I have my share of sad, just terribly sad stories as well.
I also picked up the phone and called people long distance and asked them about their products. It's shameful.
Wow.
Anyhow, folks might want to
We have to change the name of this show to Non-Internet TCI.
Folks might want to look for the October 28th issue of New Media, and you can also find this article at their website. If we have time, we might go and look at the article online. So that's one item. Your turn.
Well, we were at the trade show floor in Indianapolis, and of course we were running around with a camera with Bill and Ken and lights and all that stuff, and you get a lot of attention when you do that, even at a cable TV show. And it was a lot of fun. They kept giving us stuff, and like the camera people, they were loaded down with extremely large bags with hats and all kinds of things, and so each of us carried about 2 of these bags back at the end.
Booty. You have to go from booth to booth and get loot. Yeah,
full of loot. But the problem was we got back, we kept giving things away and give something here, something there, and the only thing that we had left, you know, at the bottom of the last bag, you know, we had to get something back for you. So I got this pencil here. It's a Court TV hammer pencil combination. We had this left. So here is a souvenir from Indianapolis, Midwest Cable Expo. Sorry we didn't get you a T-shirt or a hat or something, but
Your generosity astounds me, Chuck.
As it should.
Now, I was at the Midwest Cable Expo last year, and I got one of these 2-headed things, and it was during the O.J. trial, as I recall, and, you know, it was nice to have a Court TV thing. The difference between this year and last year is the URL is on the pencil. I don't believe it was on there last year.
Oh, okay. Of course, we interviewed Court TV as one of the segments in that show.
Yes, you did. Okay.
So what else you got?
A couple other little internet doodads. Judy, my significant other, was told that if she would download Microsoft Internet Explorer during a certain time window, a few hours after it was released, you know, like they released it at midnight, they would send her a T-shirt. So she did, and they did. Microsoft, you know, Bill Gates says the Internet Explorer is priced aggressively. In other words, we're giving it away for free.
Right.
They're also paying you to use the Internet Explorer. It's just astonishing all they're doing to get folks going with this.
I should have got that for buying Windows 95.
If you'd given me something better than this crummy gift, I might have given you this shirt.
Oh, well. Well, one neat thing that I saw in the mail, actually, when I came back from Europe, is this really surprising thing from a company called Freemark. And the idea here, I would have never thought of this. And that's what keeps happening to me on the internet is the idea of Freemark is you have electronic mail. And it's absolutely free, absolutely positively free. Free, 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 free. It doesn't cost you per message, it doesn't cost you per month, it doesn't cost you anything. It's a local phone call, and of course, there's obviously a little asterisk, and that is that there is an ad that comes up based on the things that you fill out about yourself. So here's quite an interesting thing. I mean, absolutely. Here, I'll give you an extra one. I had got two
thank
of
you.
them.
Actually, I am on their email mailing list, and I haven't figured that out. They keep sending me email offering me a free email account, and it's like, I'm already covered, guys. I'm at a university.
Well, I'll tell you one way that you might find that interesting is if you had an account for yourself, but you had like a family with a bunch of kids, and you didn't want to go buy them, pay for an account. If you had your internet connectivity, this way you're going to have a way of getting email, so we can get a few messages. So that was my thought right away, is you might have one internet connection in a family with one email account, and this will be the other 7 for the kids and the nephews and the...
Sure, and another idea is if you move around a lot from company to company, there's a company called POBox.com, and what they advertise is they don't even give you email service, they only give you forwarding service.
Right.
And so you register once with them, and as you move from job to job...
Is that free or is that expensive?
It's a nominal charge per month.
Oh, okay.
But they'll even, if you wanted to register severance.com, if somebody else hasn't done that, they'll provide that kind of service as well. And so your email can be chuck@severance.com, for instance.
Neat. So I think that's we'll see how well that pans out. So what else do you have?
Well, just a couple of more points I want to go over. One is, in a recent episode of Internet TCI, I showed my pager and how I can access this pager via the World Wide Web. Somebody can send me a page over this. And since then, you and I have both gotten hooked on a use of email that's kind of interesting with our pager. And why don't you talk a little bit about what you're up to with yours?
Well, what I have is an email address that I can forward, and it up to 480 characters comes right out on the pager. And it's used primarily for 2 things. Well, 3 things, actually. I've convinced my wife's mail account, so anytime she mails to me, it immediately comes to my pager, because she always says I never read my mail. So my wife's mail comes straight to my pager. I get paged if any of a whole set of systems gets down. It checks every hour, and it pages me automatically. And then we sort of page each other. If it's time to go to lunch and someone hasn't showed up yet, you page them for lunch. And so it's let me find a message here.
Well, while you're looking in fact, that's amazingly effective, because one time recently Chuck was supposed to meet me for dinner, and I realized we had not agreed on exactly where on Michigan State's rather large campus we were going to meet. He's riding his clunky old bicycle, and I send him an email saying, I'll be parked in front of the computer center. And he whips it out, nearly runs over somebody on his bicycle, and he finds me. And it changes the way you use a pager. Instead of getting a number and having to run and find a telephone and call somebody back, you use internet email and get immediate...
Right. The only thing that really bothers me about that whole situation is I can't reply while I'm on my bicycle. So we'll fix that. That'll have to be fixed in a few years.
Good point.
It'd be nice to be able to pop it right back so it goes to your pager. Okay. So that's pretty neat.
A couple of websites we might want to look at, or do you have something else to show us?
No, go ahead.
First off, Chuck, you remember how in a previous episode we discovered that you don't have to type http:// You can just type www.ibm.com, for instance.
Right.
And it will supply the http://. I'm going to show you how the Netscape folks have gone one further. Watch this. I'm going to type. I say go to IBM, and it does a little fiddling around, and it does a little bit of figuring. It says, well, is there a host IBM in the TCI land or at Michigan State?
What version of Netscape does this?
We could be in trouble here. I think the 2.0 version that you have here will do it.
So do you know how it does this?
I believe the algorithm, it worked on my desktop, is it simply goes, .com is where all the action is.
Right.
www is the host name, and takes it from there.
I was just thinking about that. Like Microsoft, it'd be neat if Microsoft, you could just type Microsoft.
You can.
Click. Or forward. click.
And if the system administrator of this
Yeah, we got the
computer
wrong-
had us on the current version in Netscape.
Well, we'll work on that for the next show.
Oh, well.
But that's cool. No, I was just thinking
Fun
about
fact,
that.
and next month when we have our act together, we'll show you how it actually works. Anything else internet-wise we should know, Chuck?
Yeah, I think we got things about started.
Oh, what's going on here?
Dr. Severance, Dr. Severance, I broke my knee. I need a doctor.
Dr. Severance, that's right. I'm sorry, young lady. I'm sorry your knee is hurting, but it turns out he is a doctor. He has recently been given a PhD. So he's
Does
the
anybody have
wrong
a Swiss Army knife?
He's the wrong kind of doctor, but Dr. Severance does know how to use the internet to help you find out if your knee is broken. What was the address that we went to do that, Dr. Severance?
Something about sports medicine. Gosh, you
we'll
know,
have to do an Alta Vista search and find it. I'm sorry, young lady, you're just going to have to hurt for a while, so if you'll just slink off, we'll find you help on the internet, okay? Right, Dr. Severance?
you did get me there. You did get me. You said you were going to get me, and I just, okay.
So we're ready for the rest of the show, right?
I think we are ready
Right-
for the rest
right,
of the
Doc?
show. Sir, yes, sir. Well, if you consult our World Wide Web page for Internet TCI at www.tcimet.net/internet, you will notice that Alta Vista is the official search engine of Internet TCI. You'll notice we talk about Alta Vista quite a bit on the show, and in Internet for Everyone segment, Rich is going to tell us even more, I think, about what's going to be happening next with search engines focusing on Alta Vista.
Thanks, Chuck. When we've talked about Alta Vista in past episodes, we've talked about going to the global Alta Vista in Palo Alto and doing searches of the entire World Wide Web. Today I want to talk about a different application of Alta Vista and how companies and other organizations are going to be licensing the Alta Vista intranet product for internal use. So at Michigan State University, we were one of 17 sites that participated in a worldwide beta test of the Alta Vista intranet product. We've acquired a DEC Alpha server with a pretty powerful CPU running at 333 megahertz, and we've got 256 meg of memory. Now, we've licensed Alta Vista for two distinct purposes. One of these is we want to build a campus-wide spider. So we want to use the Alta Vista engine to help people discover documents at Michigan State University. But we also have a rather unique application where we're going to use it to build a subject-specific index, and that subject will have to do with manufacturing, and I'll talk about that more later. Here's an example using Alta Vista at Digital to do a particular kind of a search. A couple of years ago, if we'd gone to any web search engine, Alta Vista didn't exist 2 years ago, but if we'd gone to one of the early ones and done a search on Michigan State University, we might have found a few hundred documents. Today, with Alta Vista, we do a search on that string, and we find 30,000 documents, and that's only going to increase over time. Now, those documents could include items that actually physically currently reside at Michigan State, but it also could include any other document where anyone has chosen to refer to Michigan State. So if you're a University of Michigan football fan and you hate MSU, your web page may have the anti-Michigan State University homepage. If you graduated from Michigan State and you still are proud of that, but you have no other affiliation with the university, your resume page will have that string in it. And what I'm saying is, increasingly over time, we'll have more and more pages scattered around the World Wide Web that may refer to Michigan State University in some way, but aren't really a page that you would want to look for if you're trying to find a document on campus. So let's say we did a search using the real central Alta Vista in Palo Alto, and we search for Spartan Stadium. We go out there and we find 9,000 hits. And the very first one on the hit list is Spartan Stadium, San Jose. It turns out Michigan State University isn't the only place on the planet that has a Spartan Stadium. So let's go to the Alta Vista in East Lansing, the one that's running at altavista.msu.edu, and search for that same string. We go for Spartan Stadium. Now we find only 300 hits, and not surprisingly, the very first one is in fact something that has something to do with Spartan Stadium. And that gives you a flavor for how valuable it could be to be able to go to a specific spider that only knows one domain, in this case the domain of a specific campus. Now, that's an example of sort of an institution-specific web spider. And I think there's a general category here we should think about, and that's training a web spider to go into some specific topic area, a subject-specific web spider. And when we do this, we sort of combine the concept of a Yahoo-like service, which is really a starting point index, with the comprehensiveness of a web spider like AltaVista. What we're really doing is we're training a spider. We're teaching the spider to examine only those sites that we know have very specific topical information, and presumably those sites that have high quality information. So in a subject-specific spider, we're probably going to tell it to go after sort of official sites, or sites that are permanent, or have high quality information. And we're probably less likely to tell it to go after personal sites. Now, we could think of a subject-specific web spider as being limited in a number of different ways. We can focus by subject area, by institution, or even by geography. You could imagine trying to train a web spider, only find me stuff that resides within the state of Michigan, for instance. Now, one of these projects that we're working on is something called NIM Online. This is the Network for Excellence in Manufacturing Online. It's a NASA-funded project that I'm involved with at Michigan State, and it's a joint venture of the College of Business, the College of Engineering, and a group called Libraries, Computing, and Technology. So what we do is we've hired a bunch of graduate students who we call surfers, and that makes it sound really informal, but in fact, they're doing a fairly systematic examination of new websites. And they try to find those that are high quality and that have something to do with the topic of manufacturing. What they do is they build a careful description of these high quality sites, and with the help of a librarian, we're building a catalog. But we're also going to train the AltaVista spider to go and index every word in each page in every one of these sites. And we think we'll see a lot of value, especially as the real AltaVista out there in Palo Alto goes from 30 million documents, as it has today, to up to 1 billion documents within a year or two. Here's an example of going off and doing a search on polymers and manufacturing, and we're comparing the central AltaVista, where we get 40,000 hits, with our small AltaVista, altavista.msu.edu, where we get 1,000 hits. Once again, we've got the focus here of it's only going and looking at the sites that we think have good information about polymers manufacturing. And we think for our customers that's going to help them find high-quality documents much faster. If we think for a second, we can imagine a whole bunch of examples of subject-specific indices that can be built. Let's have an AltaVista that knows about every major newspaper in the United States. And so when a particular breaking news item comes up, we say, go to the newspaper index and find all the newspapers that right now know something about this. Maybe we would train those spiders to go every few hours and look at these newspaper sites, because some of these sites update very frequently. And so there can be a lot of value to that. You could extend that. You could have an AltaVista that knew about every major newspaper on the planet Earth. Or if you want to go off in a different way of slicing a topic area, let's get every French language newspaper in its own AltaVista. Let's get a spider that has an index of every university in the state of Michigan, or perhaps every Big Ten university. Or if you're looking for information about cities and businesses and the business community, every chamber of commerce in a state, or every labor union in a state, let's say. Or, Chuck, something you're interested in, every parallel supercomputing homepage anywhere on the World Wide Web. Or every city homepage in a state, every parts supplier in a state. That might be useful to manufacturing firms over time. Finally, I want to give an example of a particular search that I've done a couple of ways. You may remember from a recent episode, we talked about AltaVista having this nifty host colon feature. And there we say we want AltaVista to go off to all of the sites that are within a particular domain. And it would appear that this might provide some of the functionality of what I'm describing here. If you go to the central AltaVista in Palo Alto and say host:/msu.edu, that restricts the search in that central index to those hosts that are in that domain. So let's look for Charles Severance with host:/msu.edu. And in this case, it finds 151 items. But if we go to the AltaVista that resides at Michigan State and do that exact same search at the exact same time, now we get 200 hits. Well, why is that? The reason is the AltaVista in Palo Alto has a lot of work to do. It's got 30 million pages to examine on many thousands of websites around the planet. The one in East Lansing at Michigan State has a little bit less work to do. It's got a narrower focus, so it can be more comprehensive. And if, Chuck, you've put up 50 pages about yourself in the last couple of months, it's going to find them faster than the one in Palo Alto. And that's another advantage we see to the internet concept of a web spider. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I try to put up a page about myself at least once a day.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, there's quite a market for that.
and the world needs that, I
Exactly.
must say, yes.
You know, well, here, if you recall from our Indianapolis show, I've created a page that was a challenge to AltaVista to find the page, and it was my Lansing, Michigan karaoke page. And I've been searching for about a month and a half now, and the big one hasn't picked it up in a month and a half.
Oh, maybe we should do a search and see if this one's...
So I think we ought to do a quick search, if we can, both the real one, the big Alta Vista, and your Alta Vista, and see if you can find out karaoke Lansing, Michigan.
Okay, first I want to find out, when I did this search, the very first item that came up in East Lansing was pictures of Charles Severance. Now, this is kind of a frightening subject to me.
Oh, this is...
One of the things about these spiders is sometimes they reveal things that really ought not to be revealed.
No, no, no. There's a perfectly good reason for
These
what you're
are
about to see.
Pictures of Charles Severance suitable for publication purposes. What's that all about?
The whole purpose of this is that people always want a black and white picture when they're putting you in a magazine, like in the back, a little teeny one.
Oh.
And this way I don't have to send them one. I've got one that's digitized that's suitable for a background of your workstation. It's kind of
So
too big.
It's for scholarly reasons, not...
Right.
Okay. We'll accept that for what it's worth. So I should look for karaoke.
Yep. Karaoke space Lansing, Michigan.
Well, I think
Okay.
this will be good enough.
Okay.
Ooh.
15.
Karaoke, Lansing, Michigan area.
Click on it. And that's the page.
Is your picture on it?
No.
Good.
Okay, so that's
All
my-
right. And
okay.
now we want to find out if digital at the real Alta Vista.
Exactly. And several days ago, I had just checked this, because
I should call it the global Alta Vista. Ours is real, too.
right, and I made that same mistake.
All right. So we want...
Karaoke, Lansing, Michigan, karaoke.
Do you know what karaoke means?
Something about either a short orchestra or a small orchestra or the
Means
left.
Without orchestra.
Oh, okay.
Okay is orchestra, see?
Now that
They
page has
found
been,
you.
no, they didn't. That page has been there for a long time.
Oh, that's an old one.
Because it says karaoke and it says weather in Lansing. That's what it's catching.
Oh, okay.
So it didn't find it.
Oh, well then, yeah, if we wanted to
If
do
you
this,
stick-
let's
stick
complete our
pluses
Alta Vista
everything.
lesson
Yep.
here.
Stick pluses in front of everything.
Yeah, that'll be good enough.
Yeah, same. Found the same one. It hasn't, and I've gone to all of them. By the way, I mean,
Well,
I
then
go
this proves the point.
Right.
The local spider can discover documents, and right now the Alta Vista in East Lansing has found about 70,000 documents.
Right.
Which is about 1.5 for every member of the MSU community.
I think that you're going to find right away, I mean, very shortly, you're going to find that a big single Alta Vista is just not going to be practical after
when there's
a
a
while.
billion URLs in it, I don't know how we're going to use it.
Exactly. The thing that my first reaction when I saw the MSU Alta Vista was, you ought to have, when someone types Michigan State University into the big nationwide Alta Vista, the first thing that comes up ought to be your Alta Vista. That ought to be
Well,
a benefit of having your Alta Vista.
That's a whole other subject for a whole other episode. There are folks like Dr. Mike Schwartz out at Colorado who have felt for a long time we need a distributed way to build these indices.
Right.
And what we're doing now is kind of a brute force. Here's the
Yep.
big one that's the planet, and we'll have a bunch of small ones.
When the city does the Chamber of Commerce's in the city, and then someone wants to do the state Chamber of Commerce's, da-da-da, I mean, you
Why
have to
duplicate the
why
effort?
keep
Why
walking?
not
And the other
merge?
thing is that the question is do you rank sites? Because the big problem is you're going to get 300 or 400. The important thing is what are the first few? And if your catalogers, surfer cataloger types, if they rank the sites, they need some form of ranking. I think that'd be helpful too.
You
if you could add
anticipate
that.
something that we're working on.
Oh.
Very good, Charles.
Sorry. Okay.
So send us some email about Alta Vista, global and at MSU. Let us know how you like it. In June of 1996, Sun Microsystems celebrated the first anniversary of their Java language by hosting the Java One conference. They had 5,000 or so people who were interested in programming and using the Java language. They also had a number of winners of the Java Cup Award. And at that conference, I interviewed Jun Kim, one of those winners. Let's hear what he has to say about his applet.
Well, I happened to, I guess I became interested in this because a colleague of mine, Jamori, won a previous contest that Sun had, and that really opened my eyes to the language and to the entire possibility of the contest itself. after I started working with Java, I became tremendously excited. I discovered that it had really a huge potential. It was one of the most exciting things that I've seen in the 15 years or so that I've been programming. I guess I started out 15 years ago in BASIC on a Commodore Super Pet with 8K of RAM, something like that. And then went to school, learned Pascal, learned C and C++, and a host of other things. A little bit of Smalltalk, a little bit of assembly language, some Lisp. I guess it's a fairly broad spectrum. I've managed to stay away from Fortran. COBOL wasn't really exposed to that. I started programming in Java let's say the first week of December of last year. So I guess it's been about 6 months now. I was sitting having coffee with someone, and I happened to look around and I saw a map of the University of British Columbia campus, and I thought, how many times over the past 10 years that I've been here have I been lost? And it occurred to me that almost all of us at some time or another are completely lost wherever we are. So it seemed like a natural thing to do. Java is a very interactive medium, and it's a way of making static things interactive. Maps need to be interactive, I think. I started on March 4th, and I think the contest deadline was the 30th or something like that, so I entered a day before the deadline. So about 25, 26 days.
Wow. Was it pretty intensive coding? Were you up late at night?
Yes, I got almost no sleep for the last 4 days before the deadline. I spent quite a lot of time on it, but I was working full-time during the time, so I was able to work on this only during my spare time. I had the map itself was given to me by the campus planning department. It was an existing map, an existing GIF, so that really put me quite far ahead already. The data I just entered from a campus map, that was one of the most time-consuming parts of the entire operation. I had to type it all in. I had to associate it with the format of the data that I input into the program. And I would say that took somewhere between a third and a half of the time that I actually spent at the keyboard.
So why don't you show it to us?
Love to. This is what you see when you start the program. It's a fairly large-scale view of the university campus, and the map is active. So as you move the cursor over various buildings, they highlight, and their name is displayed. One can zoom in to get a more detailed view. So here's a zoom button. And then once one is zoomed, one can navigate by dragging the map around inside the window.
Okay, now this is Java. This is all the data has been downloaded to the workstation.
That's right.
How long does it take to download the data?
Well, of course, it depends on how fast your connection is. The map itself, without any Java support, is about 27K. Together with the Java class files, it's about 80 or 90K. So it's not much more than 3 times the size of the map itself. And what you get is much more functionality, much more ability to actually extract information from the map. The other, the grand prize winner in the contest developed a really fabulous system. It really is a tremendous piece of work, but it's quite complicated to download it and then many minutes, even over a fast Ethernet connection. This has a virtual simplicity, and I think that it really tries to do only one thing, and that is present this map in an interactive form. So I think it's certainly suitable for use in a kiosk-type system, and in fact there are plans to implement this as a kiosk-type system at the University of British Columbia. So yes, it's useful both as a kiosk-type system and on people's desktops. The beauty is that a place like UBC has a lot of visitors, international visitors, and it's useful for them to be able to come to the university prepared with information about where they're going, what kind of facilities are available, where they'll need to go to find the services that they're looking for.
When do you think we're going to reach a day where somebody can be sitting in Iowa and they say, oh, let me pick a university. And they pick the University of British Columbia. They go and they look at your map, and they go and say, I'd like to audit a math class. And then they go and they find the classroom, and they not only find the size of the classroom, but they tune into the lecture in real time. When do you
Right.
think we'll be doing that?
That's a terrific idea. I hadn't really thought about that, but it's almost, I think it's very natural. I like the idea very much. The technology exists today. I don't see why we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it right now, and I think we may well see that over the next year. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, what do you think, Chuck?
Oh, I thought that was a great piece. I myself just read my first Java book on the airplane going to Europe last week or so, and I'm very impressed with the language. I think in future shows, one of my tech talks, I'll start talking about Java because it's a neat language. And a couple questions pop up. First question, at this Java 1 conference, did you see anything where Java was beginning to be something like a word processor or sort of doing desktop applications, or was it still just kind of nifty pointing things like this?
No, I didn't see stuff like that. That doesn't mean it's not out there. Okay. There are a couple of issues that face Java programmers, I think. They're all sitting there on Sun workstations with 20-inch monitors. And it's interesting, I've pulled up here this very example from the University of British Columbia, Mr. Kim's work. And we noticed the first thing when we pulled it up here on our 14-inch monitor on a Windows PC, Pentium machine, it's not very fast and it's not very interactive. Whereas it was so smooth and wonderful on that high-end Sun workstation with a 20-inch monitor. And so if you were to write a Java application that, for instance, was doing spell checking in real time
Right.
and put it on an everyday desktop PC, I think it would be so slow it would be maddening.
Okay, so that hasn't really busted through yet.
I think we need another generation or so. Maybe if you're on a 166 megahertz Pentium Pro with a 20-inch monitor and Windows 95, maybe it behaves more like a Sun. I don't know.
Good report.
Thanks, Chuck. Computers on the internet talk to each other over a language or protocol called TCP/IP. That's Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol. And we tend to take this as a given, as if the Internet Protocol is going to be with us forever. But in today's Tech Talk, Chuck is going to tell us how IP, the Internet Protocol, will undergo a transformation. Chuck?
Thanks, Rich. The title of my presentation today is the Internet Protocol version 6. It's really more commonly known by its Star Trek-esque name, and that is IP Next Generation. And if you look at the current Internet address space, the way it was designed a long time ago, and many of these designs are due to the fact that they sort of thought the whole Internet might be a few large research institutions and some research labs, maybe some military sites. And so the whole thing was set up so that it had plenty of address space for the kind of systems that they expected to have. So the Internet addresses are currently 32 bits long, resulting in over 2 billion addresses. And if you're thinking of just a few universities and research labs, that sounds pretty good. You see these numeric addresses every once in a while, the four numbers separated by dots, 35.8.2.41 and 198.21.15.6 are two examples of those numbers. Embedded within each of these addresses is a zip code or area code-like prefix, which is called the network number. So, for example, the first one, 35.8241, the prefix is the network number that's the first digit, only the 35. That's called a Class A network. And in network 35, there's 16 million possible systems that can be in that network. This network is generally assigned to one organization. On the other hand, the IP address 198.21.15.6 is what's called a Class C address, and it is network number 198.21.15. And there are quite a few of these Class C address networks, but each one is capable of having 255 possible systems. The key thing about this is that every one of these network numbers is uniquely tracked by the backbone routers. That is, it has to look at the beginning of an address enough to know exactly where to send it. Okay? And so in an address like the 35 address, it only looks at the very beginning, whereas in the 198.21.15, it has to look at the first three numbers. So each network is tracked individually, and we're sort of beginning to run out of these addresses. Over half the address space is already in use, and the internet is growing in ways that it has never grown before. And most of the remaining network numbers are in these Class C address space, with 255 addresses per network. So if you have a large organization that's coming on the network for the first time, you have to apply for a number of these Class C addresses, or 255 station addresses. This not only makes it no fun for the person that's running the internet for their company, it also makes the backbone router's job more difficult, because they got to keep track of more and more and more of these Class C addresses rather than giving a large chunk out to one organization. So how do you solve this problem? We know we got to solve it. Everyone agrees that we got to solve it. The fun starts when you start arguing about how to solve it. There's really two approaches. Any engineer will take one of these two approaches to any problem. Make a small change that leaves everything intact as much as you can, fiddle around a little bit, or make a great big change, rewrite the whole thing start from scratch. And there's been a long, furious technical discussion years before the internet became very popular. Even when the internet was unpopular 5-6 years ago, this technical discussion has been going on. The small change approach is to make the network number more flexible. There's this concept of Class A, Class B, and Class C networks, where they change the amount of the address, which is network number, and the amount of address, which is station number, within that network. Throw that whole idea out. The idea is take chunks. However big a chunk you need to take it. It's a flexible breakdown between where the network number goes and where the system within that network. And route this whole chunk, contiguous chunk, as a single unit. This helps things like the routers. The other thing that they want to do with this is go to some of these very large networks, like a Class A network with 16 million workstations, and they're never going to use 16 million workstations in one organization, such as Stanford University, for example. They have 16 million possible stations. And go take some of that address space and then reallocate it. So this results in what's called CIDR blocks, or classless internet domain routing. That's what these blocks of multiple Class Cs that are sort of amalgamated together and routed as one single thing. It's already in use. It really didn't require any modification on the part of the end users, very little modification on the part of sort of the local network administrator. The tricky part was all in the backbone routers, and they've done all that, and it's buying us a great deal of time and making the current internet protocol last much longer. Now, of course, there are some people who claim this is enough. This will solve the problem. But there's really two flaws in this. First off, reclaiming the address space that you've given out to an organization and that you're going to take back, that's going to be naturally problematic. And at 2 billion, at some point, if we start all carrying beepers and cell phones and all these things, we're just going to simply run out of addresses. I mean, you can never perfectly use these addresses any more than you can perfectly use telephones. So at some point, 32 bits is not really going to be large enough. Now, the big change approach is what's called IP version 6, or IP next generation. And they didn't go from 32 to 64 bits. They went right past that and went all the way to 128-bit addresses. And that's going to be plenty for a while. And of course, everyone thinks when they come up with a number of bits in an address, that's going to be plenty for a while. We'll find out how long that while is. IP built into every packet has a version number, so that a router can detect that one packet is version 4, which is the current version, and another packet is a version 6, which is the new version. So the router could route either protocol transparently. To truly talk IP version 6, though, will require new IP software, TCP IP software, on both the clients and in the routers. But one thing that the IP version 6 folks have spent a lot of time thinking about is how to migrate. I mean, we're not going to all wake up one morning and say, okay, January 9th or January 6th is IP version 6 day, click, you're cut over. So they have all kinds of migration plans that they've come up with, strategies to allow the two networks to sort of interoperate and the data to cross each other using a technique called tunneling. So an IPv6 network can talk to another IPv6 network where there's an intermediate IPv4 network. And the same can be said if you have IPv4, and then IPv6 in the middle. So these are called tunneling, where they can make use of each other's connections. And the old addresses old IPv4 addresses are grandfathered into IPv6 using a special prefix. So at some point, a lot of the existing systems won't even need new software, and they won't even need to change their address. The interesting thing about this for me is that for a long time, this seemed to me to be a rather abstract discussion. And I had to write a column recently for IEEE Computer about this, so I was going and checking it all out again. And the thing that surprised me the most was that there are actually people working on products for IPv6, rather than sort of a ivory tower discussion of the theory and the value of it. So the products that are currently in the pipeline Cisco, Bay Networks, and others are already working on routers that support IPv6 and IPv4 at the same time. And even more exciting, there are clients that are in development for all the popular computer clients. So we have PC clients that are in development, we have Windows clients, we have Macintosh, and Unix IPv6 clients. And of course, a few of the really advanced folks will be the ones that take it first. So sort of in summary, IP Next Generation, I think, in my assessment, has really considered a lot of the really important implementation details. It's not just a protocol that says, here's a wonderful protocol in theory. This is a protocol that we can actually gently evolve from. And as products begin to appear, there will be a gentle deployment. And I propose a scenario. Let's say, for example, our current internet's getting a little bit clogged and the routers can't quite keep track of things and it's slowing stuff down. And someone comes out with a new fast IPv6 backbone that's going to run very fast. The IPv6, they thought about how to make ATM run well, how to make large packets or small packets. They've thought a lot of these things over. So you have this fast, cheap, good IPv6 network. And so now we have a national infrastructure that can start taking some IPv4 networks and getting them across, and maybe then a small organization will go IPv6. And so you can sort of see this IPv6 just sort of gently taking over the universe, which would be very exciting because at some point, if you're going to change over a 3 or 4 year period, you're going to throw away all your computers anyways and get new ones anytime 3 years goes by. So eventually you'll get this IPv6. So I'm really excited that this is sort of moving from the sort of the technical, theoretical discussion. So before I let Rich jump in here, he's got a whole bunch of comments, I'm sure. I'll show you a couple of URLs. Of course, the second URL is www.ietf.org. And that first URL, playground.sun.com/pub/ipng/html/ipng-main.html. That the long one at the very beginning is the one of the people who participate in the groups, and that actually was the one that I really enjoyed the most. So, tell me a little bit about IPNG. What did you think of that? What are your reactions?
Well, a few years ago, I was perhaps foolish enough to be on a mailing list where they were arguing about the next generation, and they had not come anywhere near the standard that it looks like is evolving here. And there was a lot of argument back then over should it be 64 bits, should it be 128 bits. And you literally saw discussions like people would say, we need to have enough address space so we can address every device that might be owned by every human on the planet. But let's make sure that maybe we can handle 10 devices per person, and let's have several powers of 2 expansion because we have geometric growth in the number of people on the planet. And now they came up with a solution that said, no, we're going to have 128 bits. Well, you know how much you can count in 128 bits? You can count every atom in the universe. So if we make every atom in the universe an addressable internet device, we've got enough IP space, address space to
Hydrogen.sun.center of the universe.
Right.
Okay.
A couple of points having to do with the numbers that are also kind of funny. As you pointed out, we've got room in the current scheme for 2 billion machines. And the problem is the way we allocate it, we let large institutions grab a large amount of the space, as you mentioned. How many hosts do you think have recently been counted on the internet? There's a guy that goes out and does a survey every once in a while, tries to count and estimate how many computers there are on the internet.
Texas.
A guy named John Quarterman is involved. I'm thinking of a different fellow out in California,
okay.
But pick a number.
No idea. Clueless.
Over 10 million. We're about 12 million, we think, computers out there on the network. But after that came out, there was an article in the New York Times where somebody tried to analyze, and this is Quarterman, John Quarterman down in Texas, trying to analyze what are the counties in the United States that have the most internet activity. And the way of measuring that was, let's look and see how many computers there are that have internet addresses. And Bay County, Michigan was very high on the list. And people are scratching their heads in the state of Michigan. We're going, wait a minute, they raise a lot of sugar beets up there. There's some boats.
Do they have Dow Chemical?
Not in Bay, but that still wouldn't get there. They have Season, which has a lot of scientific computers.
EPA's got something?
EPA's up there. None of that explained it.
What was it?
They found an internet domain that had 32,000 hosts. Now, what's funny about the number 32,000?
It's power 2.
It's real close to a power of 2, and it turns out a company called Concentric, which has Chris.com, had gone and registered a bunch of computers. That we don't think they actually have 32,000 physical computers in Bay City, but they're ready when they have that many. They've allocated that much address space. So these numbers games can lead to misperceptions about the actual size of the internet.
Well, thanks.
Thank you. have a lot of places to surf today, and first Chuck is going to tell us about the city of East Lansing, a place near and dear to us, and their new site on the World Wide Web. Chuck?
Well, Rich, the City of East Lansing has spent a few months preparing their site, and they were sort of not on the air, and then they unveiled it at a city council meeting with great fanfare, and the press was invited, and Internet TCI had a special little mini broadcast for the city of East Lansing, and we took a look with Rod Taylor at their page, and I told him we'd take a look. Rich and I would then take a look in a little more depth at the page. I told him there's a little danger. Rich and I sometimes make a little bit of fun of pages once in a while. So we'll start out here. We'll take a look at the City of East Lansing page. There's a couple of goals that they really went for, and I think they did a pretty good job of this. Sort of this is to benefit the citizens of the City of East Lansing, the current ones. There's sort of events and attractions that you might expect, but they also spend a good deal of time sort of in city government trying to come up with ways to really use the internet to do things better. So, for example, you can do things like use licenses, permits, and applications online. So if you want to get a building permit application, you click here. Now, what they haven't been able to do is completely integrate the computing inside the City of East Lansing. So what they do is they build these forms that you fill out, you click, and then you hit the print button. And what that does is it means that that is the piece of paper. I mean, you sign it, you bring it in, it was one trip, you use the internet to get the form, and you just fill it out, and that is the official building permit form. So even though it's not super nerd, I mean, it still is a very practical tool.
That's real clever, because the conventional approach, if they'd hired me to do this, I would have said, well, if you want to replicate a form online, there's two ways to go about it. You either need to tie it to a live database, and
Or
what they
CGI.
CGI or web middleware, read my article in New Media Magazine, or you need to replicate the paper perfectly, and that means Adobe Acrobat, which
Right.
means scanning the stuff in, print it out on a laser printer. They got to install the Acrobat reader and print it out, and then
Scribble
fill
it in
out
with
by
your
paper.
hand. Right.
And this is a clever compromise. This is
Yeah.
using the web form to capture the keystrokes, but we're not stuffing the keystrokes on the back end into a database.
Right.
Where it comes out on your printer.
And-
That's a clever compromise.
And what their goal is to move towards that. You know,
Sure, and
move
they got the
toward-
forms already.
Yeah,
so-
exactly. And at some point, instead of saying print, it'll be submit.
And for all we know, they're capturing the data in the background anyhow.
Right. So here's another thing. They've got a chat room. I don't know if there'll be anybody in here, but go ahead and just type in for me. Type Chuck. Harvey. Thank you. I feel better now. I think
Okay.
I can join now. And this is where people can come in, and they have a chat room just for East Lansing. And let's see who's all in here right now. Welcome, Harvey Wallbanger. Well, there was someone in a little while ago. Pan, Ann. See, there's not enough people in here. But this chat mechanism, you can click on real time, and we won't see it. You hit up, you send your message,
Perfect.
and then you hit update, and now it just sits, and all of a sudden, if something else is going to show up, it would pop up right here. And if I wanted to respond, I would just click on this, fill this in, type my message, and hit update. So it's not quite as nice as some of the interactive things, but it's using you don't have to have your own program. I mean, that's a common theme that you keep saying is, let's all do it with one program and not
Sure.
keep having to write a bunch of programs to do this.
Now, you know my personal opinion about real-time chat, having hung out on America Online for a year or so.
Well, they do a nice
What
job.
do people do when they do real-time chat? They flirt, they do cocktail chatter, and that's it. And if you ever want to have any serious discussions about computer, it needs to be non-real time. It needs to be
Email.
conferencing, bulletin board, mailing list, stuff like that. Because you don't have enough people in East Lansing who want to gather online.
Right.
You know, let's all gather at a real physical place in East Lansing. Okay. Am I foaming at the mouth?
No, you're doing okay. You're doing. I mean, people after a while, you get on the internet and all the jazzy stuff. You know, you cut through that after a while, and you say, "What the heck is this really used for?" I mean,
But this is an attractive site, and that's good that they put some real data up there, the forms and.
Yep. And they have the standard stuff for businesses where they say this is our average median income and da-da-da, how many days of. So they have some of that stuff as well, some of the more practical
There's a lot of
stuff.
maturity reflected here, because 2 years ago when a city put up a website, it was basically an ad for the mayor. You know, it would be
Right.
a large picture of the mayor, welcome to our city, and that would be about it. So when they put real information of utility to real people, that's quite a step
They
forward.
also hired a designer to help design this page for them, and to me, that really helped this page, because one thing that really bothers me with an organization that first creates a web page for the very beginning, for the very first time, is that they tend to say, okay, what's our org chart? And the org chart has something to do with, who was hired last year, and they merged these. And this does not show me org chart at all. It shows
Right.
me what are the questions that I'm going to ask. And I
Right.
think page designers have to get beyond the org chart of their organization as if that's the most fascinating thing to the typical web viewer. Because
Absolutely.
org charts really, to me, have very little space on a web page. So.
Okay. Let's go do a little bit more surfing.
Okay.
As we tape this episode, we're right before the election in '96, and so all of our viewers are probably sick of anything to do with politics. But we want to do a quick recap of some of the political websites that are out there.
I think the neatest thing about this is to sort of think about how it's changed. How politics is going to change using the internet, and the fact that you can have all this quick turnaround and feedback and studying. It's very interesting.
A couple of episodes ago, we interviewed David Lytle, the White House webmaster, and one of his points was '96 would be the first year where people would begin to use the internet as one of the main ways of getting information. Now, we're bombarded on television and the newspaper and radio and everywhere else, but the internet's a way that people are beginning to get information about their candidates. Now, Dole and Kemp had kind of an interesting idea. They said, let's appeal to the self-interest of the voter, and let's give them a way where you can go and calculate how much money you're going to save, allegedly under the Dole-Kemp tax cut. So that's kind of a neat way to use the interactivity of the internet to get the message across.
So did you calculate your tax cut?
No, I won't comment on who I'm going to vote for, Chuck.
Oh, okay.
Now, not everybody takes all this stuff seriously, and so while there's dole96.com, the official site, somebody went and registered dole96.org and made a parody site. So don't pick fruit, not a very attractive summary of Senator Dole. I don't know, Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I found it pleasant and funny. Page down.
They're just making lots of fun of the poor man.
Help Dole triumph.
Okay. So some of the stuff is real and some of it is bogus. Let's go to the Clinton-Gore campaign. This is, I believe, the real site, Building a Bridge to the 21st Century.
I've heard that
If you want to do a parody, you could have some fun with that. Okay.
He says that all the time.
It's pretty much a mantra at this point. Now, judging by this picture here, Chuck, do you think that's a parody site, maybe?
No, I think they took that off of television, going one slow scan frame at a time.
Until they found the worst frame possible.
The worst frame.
And this is actually a nice use of an animated GIF.
I think this is a really attractive
It's a
website.
well-done site. And in epturum et somebody who knows Latin, send us some email and tell us what the heck this means. I think always inept or something like that.
Oh, wait. Don't, I played with this one. Click on Our Successes. Hang on. Page down. Now click on Great Accomplishments.
This was deliberate.
This is deliberate.
Ah, a little web joke, a little inside joke here. Oh, I like that. That's pretty good. Now, since we interviewed David Lytle and he's left the White House and is going off and putting up not an official Democratic Party site, but a site that allows people to build their own pages telling why they like a particular candidate, he's built a mechanism where you can create your own page describing what it is that you like about your favorite candidates. And in this case, of course, it's a Democratic-oriented site, so we know who it's going to be oriented towards.
So have you taken a look at any of those?
You actually have to follow a few menu steps to get in there and tell it exactly what you want to do, and I didn't go through the exercise. Wouldn't you know it, the net's not being real responsive right now. Here we go.
Join, contribute.
You can call an 800 number, or you can go through and interactively fill out some information, and it'll sort of build a page for you. Okay.
Recorded testimonial.
It'll record a testimonial. Now, the press and the media are not leaving you alone in all of this. MTV wants to get people registered to vote, and they have their Rock the Vote campaign, so they have a site to support that and encourage people to register, and they have all the absentee ballot request deadlines and stuff like that. So that's sort of a nice politically neutral, just get people registered.
One of the things that I was sort of looking at some of this similar stuff, and that was the fact that it's so easy to take a straw poll with the internet.
That's true. That's a
the
good point.
Computer World magazine had a whole series of things that was a long-running straw poll about information technology professionals like ourselves. and how we, as this little tiny segment of the world, how we would vote and our whole, and the internet is a wonderful way to gather that information. Now, of course, it's not statistically significant because sort of by using the internet that says something about, it's not a random sample
Right.
anymore, but it is interesting to be able to sort of focus in on how this real tiny set of folk, how they particularly feel that the internet's a neat way to
Well,
do
that's
that.
one of the points Lytle made was that, you know, the internet, he says, the web is not about me, the publisher, it's about you, the reader. And so getting feedback. Yeah. Now, here we have a couple of media organizations that have gotten together, and that's an interesting trend. CNN and Time said, let's build a political website together and tell about stories. Of course, CNN now has been acquired by Time Warner. So Bob Dole the comic.
Sure, this is a real one? This sort of sounds like it
I
might be,
think
it's spoof.
I think Bob Dole can be a funny guy. It's just he's in the wrong medium.
He should be on the internet. instead of on
Maybe he
television.
should be. Maybe in a Usenet news group, all that wit would come through. I don't know. And then let me mention one more site. It's the case that, you know, all of this stuff is out there, and we're looking at it right now. And starting the day after the election,
They're going to yank them all.
these pages will start to disappear, and that's really a shame. And the fellow that invented a technology called WAIS, Wide Area Information Servers, Brewster Cayley, has this really ambitious project to build a service that every day will capture the internet. And we can talk in a future episode about whether we think that's actually viable or not.
Right.
But he started small. He's trying to archive the 1996 campaign.
But that's a neat idea.
And the day after the election, he's going to announce, you know, come to our archive site, archive.org, and take a look, and you'll see all of this stuff that you missed. And presumably not just
Well,
national
yeah.
elections, but also...
And in 100 years from now.
Right, that's
all
the point.
all the subtle nuances about it.
That's the point. So, and, you know, I've got some questions about how the heck you do that. How do you archive somebody else's CGI script?
That's good. Yep.
How the heck do you do that?
I don't know.
That's kind of complicated, but more power to them. And
So do they currently have a site?
Well, let's see if we can find it.
Just got about a minute left here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do they have stuff now, or are they just sort of waiting? Or
Well,
web?
they brag about what they're doing with the web archive. But they don't actually have a lot of data up. They've taken a few sites, sample sites,
Okay.
and put them up. And then just for yucks, they've got some memorabilia from the Smithsonian,
Ah, okay.
political memorabilia. That's kind of slick. And here's the team that's working on it. So folks
So
can
do you
read
know?
more.
So do you know any of these guys?
No, I know of them.
Okay.
So go check out the political sites in the archive, and we'll see you on the net.